One of my all-time favorite things to cook is pork tenderloin. Whenever I use sous vide, it turns out perfectly done, edge to edge. It's juicy, it's tender, and it's one of my favorite meals to really show off how amazing sous vide is. I'm going to tell you why and how to do it yourself coming up next on Amazing Food Made Easy. Hey there, I'm Jason Logston from Amazing Food Made Easy and president of the International Sous Vide Association, and I'm really excited to be working with the Ohio Pork Council today because pork is one of my favorite things to cook and to eat. It's also one of my favorite things to sous vide. And for years, I've told people that one of the first things they need to cook when they get a sous vide machine is pork tenderloin, because it is just so much juicier than it is with traditional methods. When using traditional cooking, you need to cook your pork to 145 Fahrenheit or above to make it safe to eat, or 160 for ground pork. Some places even suggest 160 or more for any type of pork, regardless of whether it's whole or ground. But with sous vide, you can hold the pork at a lower temperature, like 135 or 140 Fahrenheit, and then you can hold it for a long enough time there to fully pasteurize it. That means that it's just as safe as it is at a higher temperature. But this lower temperature results in much juicier pork. It's basically the difference between a medium steak and a well-done pot roast. They are hardly even the same meal. And pork is also just one of my favorite things to eat, period. Even though it's really lean like chicken, I find it has a lot more flavor and it's more forgiving to cook. It's also a lot more versatile. It can hold up to a lot of different sauces, and I think the texture is a little bit better when you're going to have it in stir fries or just even eat it whole as a big tenderloin. It's also a great source of protein. I learned from the Ohio Pork Council that every 3 ounces of pork has more than 20 grams of protein in it, which makes it a perfect post-meal workout. I just toss some pre-cooked pork in with some broccoli and carrots with a splash of olive oil, a little bit of lemon juice, and I have a great post-workout meal. And with the sous vide method, it makes the cooking process turn out perfect every single time. Because once you find that perfect temperature for you, whichever one you really like, you can hit it exactly every single time. I personally love 140 degrees. The Ohio Pork Board recommends 145, and some people go as low as 135. But whatever you prefer for your own preferences and your own palate, you can achieve it every single time with sous vide. Also, because of the temperature precision of the water bath, you have a lot more leeway in the cooking time before it affects your food. So the tenderloin might usually cook for 2 to 3 hours, but it would be fine in the sous vide machine for another few hours with no negative effect on the meat. This makes it perfect for me and my busy schedule, because I never know exactly when dinner is going to be. Maybe you're a little more structured than I am, but with the confusion and kind of the chaos surrounding my day-to-day life, being able to hold the meat and not have any negative effect for a few hours is a huge benefit in my mind. I also really enjoyed working with the Ohio Pork Council coming up with this video and the recipe because I learned a lot about pork, and I didn't realize that there's more than 3,500 family farms in Ohio who raise enough pork to feed about 25 million people. So when you buy pork at your grocery store or the farmer's market, you're supporting Ohio farm families that produce that pork, which just blows my mind. 25 million people fed by them. It's crazy, and especially for something that tastes so delicious. So to make sure that you can get the most out of your own pork tenderloin when you're sous videing it at home, I want to give you an overview of how the process works. To help with this, I'm going to provide a link to my recipe, the full recipe page on my site below, in case you're watching this on YouTube or one of the other channels. That way I'll make it easy to put together a perfectly cooked pork tenderloin every time that you can serve it at any meal when you really want to impress your friends and family. First up, you just need to prep the pork tenderloin. Remove it from the store packaging, take off any silver skin that's on there because it's probably not going to break down. That and connective tissue generally doesn't break down too much in a sous vide machine. Apply some salt. I usually use kosher salt, but any salt that you have on hand will do. And if you want any spices or rubs, you can actually put that on as well. Some people don't like to use spice rubs before the sous vide process, and that's fine. I enjoy experimenting with them and like the flavor they add, so I tend to experiment and use a few different ones. But I do save black pepper until the end afterwards. I usually don't add any butter or olive oil or fats into the bag because it can actually draw some flavor out of the meat, but I will add butter or olive oil at the end when I'm searing it off and really finishing it. Once you've prepped the meat, you can then put it in a sous vide bag and seal it. Any food safe, heat safe plastic bag works well, and there's several types of sous vide bags like Ziploc freezer bags. You can use the water displacement method. There's edge vacuum sealers, chambered vacuum sealers, silicone stasher bags. Pretty much anything works with pork. It's a very sturdy and versatile protein, which is one of the things I really like about it. If If you're cooking multiple pork tenderloins, which is something you can definitely do, just make sure they are in a single layer in the bag or use multiple bags where the water can circulate around them. You don't want to make just kind of one big cylinder of pork tenderloin, or it's really going to increase the cook times. Next, you just have to prepare the water bath. You want to fill your container with water. You can use a stock pot, a polycarbonate container. I use Lapavia, Rubbermaid, and Cambro are the three main brands that I turn to. You just want to put the water level between the min and max line. Set your sous vide machine to your desired temperature or your desired doneness. Talked about that a lot before. My favorite is 140. Ohio Pork Council recommends 145, and there are a lot of people that like going down in the 135 range. You just place your sous vide bag in the water bath. The water temperature, it doesn't have to preheat or come up to temperature ahead of time. It's a long enough cook time that as the water heats, so will your pork, and so it doesn't affect the cook time any at all. Just make sure that the entire bag and the meat is underwater. You don't want any ends sticking up because that can be unsafe. Fourth, you just let the pork tenderloin cook in the warm water bath. You can find out the exact cook time using some of my pasteurization charts, but for about 140 degrees for a typical pork tenderloin, you're looking about 2 to 3 hours. And as I said, there's a lot of leeway here that you can hold the meat. So if you have to go 5 hours, doesn't matter. If you go 3.5, that's completely fine. You don't have to stress nearly as much as you do in traditional cooking. Next, remove the pork tenderloin from the hot water bath and you are ready to finish it. If you are doing food prep and you like cooking things ahead of time, you can actually leave it in the bag, chill it in an ice bath, and then you can store it in the fridge for several weeks. It's great for preparing meals ahead of time and for storing leftovers when you know you've made too much for one meal, but you want to save it and store it for a longer time. Before you would finish it then, you can just throw it in the sous vide machine for about an hour to bring it back up to temperature, and then you can pick up with the sear. That's what we're going to do next. When you're ready to eat, it's time for a quick sear. This just gives it a little bit of coloring on the outside, a little more texture, and a little more flavor. So you take it out of the plastic bag, you dry it off real well. I like to use paper towels or dishcloths. I think they work better because you want that moisture to be gone. You want to sear it over high heat because we want it to be searing for the lowest amount of time possible because the inside temperature is already exactly where we want it, so we don't want to raise that any. You can use a hot skillet, a cast iron pan, even a hot grill or a smoker. They all work pretty well for getting kind of that crust and that sear on there. If you're searing inside, use a high smoke point oil. There's a lot of different ones out there, but avocado oil, grapeseed oil, extra light olive oil, not extra virgin, but extra light, and ghee are some of the ones people turn to a lot. And that's going to reduce the amount of smoke that you're going to be sending up into your apartment or your house during the sear. Before I started using a high smoke point oil, I was setting off my smoke alarms all the time. Now I set them off less, at least still occasionally, but less than I used to. You only want to sear for 2 to 3 minutes total, turning it every 30 to 45 seconds until you start getting a golden brown crust. And if you want a better sear, you can always let it cool off on the counter or even in an ice bath for 10 to 15 minutes before searing. That will lower the temperature of the outer edges of the pork tenderloin a little bit more. So when you sear it, you have more leeway when you're bringing it up to temperature before you overcook the middle. Once you get that great sear on it, it's now ready to serve. You can serve it however you would prefer to serve a traditional pork tenderloin. I've sliced it thinly and served it kind of with gravy or sides. I've thick sliced it with spiced apples, which is one of my favorite things, and I have a recipe for that on my website. And you can serve it with any of your favorite pork tenderloin accompaniments. Even just a little bit of sea salt, fresh herbs, and a little compound butter on it is an amazing way to serve it. Now you know everything you need to know about making perfectly cooked sous vide pork tenderloin. I want to thank the Ohio Pork Council again for helping make this possible. If you have any comments, please drop them below. And for people just getting started, I always recommend my free Quick Start course at afmeasy.com/quickstart. And I do a lot of work with the International Sous Vide Association, including free showcases, demos, and cook-alongs at theisva.org. Till next time, I'm Jason Logston.